Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling more drained than when it started? Not because it was long, not because it was intense, but because, once again, you were the one holding everything together. You listened, you understood, you made space, and somehow you were the one who paid for it. Here's what nobody really talks about. Empathy doesn't automatically make you strong. Used the wrong way, it teaches people how much of you they can take. If you've ever wondered why this keeps happening, don't click away yet, because what looks like kindness on the surface can quietly turn into self-neglect. And once you cross that line, empathy stops protecting you. It starts working against you. This matters because the cost doesn't show up all at once. It shows up slowly. You don't wake up one day suddenly exhausted by people. You get there one small compromise at a time. You tell yourself it's easier to let things slide. You explain instead of stopping the conversation. You stay a little longer than you want to. And over time, something shifts. You're still caring, but you're quieter about what you need. You're still patient, but you're carrying tension you never release. Here's the real problem. When empathy has no limits, it doesn't just drain you, it reshapes you. You start mistaking tolerance for maturity. You start thinking strength means never pulling back. And the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to tell where your responsibility actually ends. That's why this isn't about becoming colder or less understanding. It's about noticing the moment when caring starts costing you your clarity. Because once that happens, empathy doesn't help anyone, especially you. Before we push this any further, let's slow everything down for a second. Not to get heavy, not to overthink, just to step back from the constant motion of reacting, responding, explaining, absorbing. Because when you're always in empathy mode, it's hard to see the pattern you're inside of. From the outside, it can look like you're just being patient, just being understanding, just being the calm one. But Carl Jung was interested in what happens beneath that surface. He spent years paying attention to the quiet ways people lose themselves, not through chaos but through over-adaptation. Not by being careless, but by being too accommodating. What he noticed was simple and uncomfortable. When someone never separates themselves from what they're taking in, they don't stay connected to others. They slowly disappear from themselves. There's no dramatic breaking point at first, no obvious warning sign, just a growing sense of inner pressure, a feeling that you're always managing something that isn't yours. Jung believed this was the moment where self-awareness either grows or collapses. So before we talk about detachment, before we talk about boundaries or strength, this pause matters because detachment, in this context, isn't a technique. It's a shift in position, a move from being inside everything to finally standing somewhere solid of your own. Here is Jung's warning about compassion without boundaries. This is where Jung gets very clear and a little uncomfortable. He warned that compassion, when it isn't balanced by self-awareness, doesn't stay healthy. It slowly turns against the person practicing it. One of his sharpest lines puts it plainly. Compassion has its limits, and compassion can degenerate into weakness. Notice what he's pointing at. Not empathy itself, but empathy without an inner stop button. Jung observed that people who are highly understanding often start taking on things that were never theirs to manage. For example, you listen to someone explain the same issue over and over, and instead of noticing the pattern, you keep offering reassurance. You walk away feeling oddly tense, even though nothing bad happened. Or you sense frustration in a room and immediately adjust your tone, your posture, your words before anyone says a thing. You leave feeling off balance, but you can't explain why. Or someone reacts strongly, and instead of letting that reaction exist, you rush to soften it, clarify it, or take responsibility for it. Later you replay the interaction and wonder why you feel guilty. Jung saw this as a boundary problem, not a personality flaw. When compassion has no internal limit, it becomes automatic. You respond before you choose. You absorb before you assess. Over time, this creates weakness, not in character, but in structure. You become too open to influence, too quick to carry emotional weight that doesn't belong to you, too practiced at smoothing things over instead of standing your ground. Jung believed real strength required an internal separation point, the ability to recognize where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. Without that, compassion turns into a reflex, and reflexes don't protect you. They just keep firing, whether the situation calls for them or not. So how empathy quietly turns against you. This is the part most people miss, because nothing obviously goes wrong. There's no confrontation, no explosion, just a slow shift in how you show up. At first, empathy feels productive. You're helpful, you're steady, you're the one people rely on. But over time, it starts changing your behavior in small, almost invisible ways. You start anticipating reactions before they happen. You choose your words carefully, not to be clear, but to prevent discomfort. If someone seems irritated, you immediately search for what you did wrong, even when nothing points to you. You replay conversations, not to learn, but to self-correct. You begin explaining yourself preemptively, clarifying things that weren't challenged, softening statements that didn't need softening. Another common shift. You stay longer in situations that drain you because leaving would feel unfair. You ignore your own signals because you don't want to appear difficult. And here's where empathy really turns against you. You start confusing responsibility with control. You feel accountable for how things land, even when you didn't create the conditions. Resentment creeps in quietly, not because you don't care, but because you're carrying more than your share. Jung believed this kind of empathy becomes compulsive. It's no longer a choice, it's a habit. And habits like this don't announce themselves as problems. They just slowly pull you out of alignment, until one day you realize you're exhausted, irritated, and unsure why. That's when empathy stops being a strength. Not because you care too much, but because you never learned when to step back. And we get to know detachment is not coldness. This is usually where people hesitate, because the moment you hear detachment, it can sound like shutting down, pulling away, or becoming less human. That's not what this is. Detachment isn't about caring less. It's about not fusing yourself to everything you care about. Jung made this distinction very clear when he wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." What he's pointing to is awareness, not withdrawal. Healthy detachment shows up in small, grounded ways. For example, you can listen without jumping in to solve the issue. You can let someone be frustrated without trying to absorb or neutralize it. You can hear criticism without immediately reshaping yourself around it. Detachment means you allow reactions to exist without treating them as instructions. Another example. Someone misunderstands you, and instead of over-explaining, you pause. You check whether clarity is actually required, or whether you're just uncomfortable sitting with tension. Or you notice yourself wanting to smooth things over, and instead of acting on that impulse, you wait. You give yourself space to decide rather than react. This isn't distance, it's balance. Jung believed that without this separation, people confuse connection with enmeshment. They think being close means being affected by everything, but detachment creates a buffer, not a wall. It lets empathy stay strong because it's chosen, not forced. And once you experience that difference, something clicks. You realize you don't have to disappear to stay connected. You just have to stay anchored to yourself while you care. So what healthy detachment actually looks like? Let's get practical and really feel what healthy detachment can look like in real life. Think about a situation where someone is upset. Normally, your instinct might be to fix it immediately, but with healthy detachment, you pause. You ask yourself, is this my responsibility to fix, or just my space to witness? Imagine a coworker is frustrated, and their frustration spills over into your interaction. Without detachment, you might absorb their tension, apologize, or overcompensate. With detachment, you acknowledge it, respond calmly if needed, but don't carry their energy home with you. You leave the situation intact, and so do they. Or consider someone venting repeatedly about a problem that they've brought to you many times before. You could jump in again, try to guide them, and exhaust yourself. Detachment here means listening without trying to control the outcome. You support them with presence, not over-involvement. Another example, a friend misinterprets something you said. Your first impulse is to clarify and justify. Healthy detachment is holding your ground, recognizing that their reaction is theirs, not a reflection of your worth. You choose whether clarification is necessary, not because you fear conflict, but because it matters in context. Even small, everyday situations count. You notice a tense energy in a meeting, but instead of bending to match it, you maintain your tone, your posture, and your mindset. You respond consciously instead of reacting automatically. The common thread, detachment, is about noticing, pausing, and choosing how you engage. You're not shutting down, you're staying anchored. You're giving yourself space while still offering empathy, without losing yourself. It's subtle, but over time, this builds resilience. Empathy no longer drains you. Instead, it becomes a tool you control. And the kicker? People around you notice the difference. They may not name it, but your presence shifts from reactive to steady. That calm focus actually invites healthier interactions, not more chaos. This is where detachment stops being scary. It's not loss of care. It's care that works for you, not against you. Now let's compare between strong empathy versus weak empathy. Now let's talk about the payoff, the real reason detachment matters. Weak empathy keeps you on autopilot. You absorb everything, adjust to everyone, and slowly lose track of your own needs. You might think you're helping, but really, you're just sustaining patterns that keep you exhausted and frustrated. Strong empathy, on the other hand, works differently. It's deliberate. It's grounded. You care, but you're choosing how, when, and where. You're participating in a situation, not being swept away by it. Think about it like this. A colleague or friend is upset, and normally you might stay late or overextend yourself to fix it. Weak empathy says, I need to manage this now. Strong empathy says, I see the situation, I understand, and I'll contribute without sacrificing my balance. The outcome might be the same, but your energy remains intact. Or consider repeated conflicts in your life. Weak empathy pulls you into every argument, every tension, every minor upset. Strong empathy lets you witness and respond selectively, keeping you clear-headed and composed. Here's the key. Strong empathy doesn't just preserve you. It amplifies your impact. People respond to presence that is steady, not reactive. They listen when you speak. and they respect boundaries because you model them consistently. Jung put it this way: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, unchecked empathy runs on autopilot. Detachment brings consciousness into play. You regain control of where your energy goes and how you influence situations. The difference is subtle at first, but over time, it's unmistakable. Weak empathy burns you out. Strong empathy protects you while still connecting you meaningfully with others. And once you reach that point, caring isn't a drain. It's a source of clarity and strength. You don't just survive relationships or interactions. You thrive in them. This is why learning to detach isn't optional if you want your empathy to remain powerful. Because the moment empathy becomes a reflex, it stops serving you and everyone around you. Here are some practical steps to build detachment without losing empathy. All right, now we're getting to the actionable part. You've seen how empathy can quietly turn against you, but here's the good news. It doesn't have to. You can care deeply without losing yourself. The key is building detachment while keeping your empathy alive. 1. Notice before you react. The first step is simple but powerful. Pause. Before you respond to frustration, tension, or someone else's emotional surge, give yourself a beat. Just a moment to ask, do I need to react right now? For example, someone criticizes a choice you made. Instead of jumping to defend or apologize immediately, take a breath. Notice your feelings. Decide if a response is actually needed or if staying present and neutral is enough. That pause is the start of conscious empathy. 2. Set internal boundaries. Next, learn to recognize where your responsibility ends. Ask yourself, is this truly mine to carry, or is it theirs? Imagine a friend venting for the third time about the same situation. You might feel compelled to fix it, but your job isn't to solve their problems. Listening, acknowledging, and remaining supportive is enough. That's setting a mental boundary without cutting off connection. 3. Use selective engagement. You don't have to be available for every emotional storm. Detachment means choosing when and how to engage. Think about a tense team meeting. Someone tries to pull you into unnecessary conflict. You can respond with clarity and calm, or you can step back and let them work it out themselves. You're not abandoning empathy. You're preserving it for moments that truly matter. 4. Check your energy levels. Self-awareness is essential. Regularly ask, am I drained or energized by this interaction? For instance, if a conversation with a friend or coworker leaves you feeling depleted over and over, it's a signal to adjust your involvement. This might mean limiting time spent, changing the topic, or stepping away entirely. Your empathy stays intact because it's chosen, not forced. 5. Anchor yourself in your own needs. Finally, maintain a solid sense of self. Detachment works best when you have your own anchor. This could be routines, hobbies, reflection time, or even a simple daily check-in with yourself. For example, after a heavy interaction, you might journal for 5 minutes or go for a short walk to reset your energy. When your sense of self is intact, you can engage empathetically without absorbing everything around you. 6. Reflect after interactions. Take time to review your interactions. Ask yourself, where did I stay balanced? Where did I give too much? This reflection helps you spot patterns before they become habits. Over time, it teaches you where your empathy thrives and where it risks becoming a weakness. 7. Practice saying no without guilt. Detachment often requires asserting boundaries, and that means saying no. For example, If someone asks for emotional support at a time when you genuinely can't provide it, it's okay to say, "I can't give this the attention it deserves right now." Saying no doesn't make you uncaring. It makes your care sustainable. These steps aren't dramatic. There's no one big switch that flips. But applied consistently, they change everything. Empathy stops being a reflex that drains you and becomes a conscious tool that strengthens both you and the people around you. Once you master these practices, you'll notice interactions feel lighter, clearer, and far more effective. You're no longer lost in other people's emotions. You're present, grounded, and fully capable of helping without losing yourself. Even when you know the theory and try to set boundaries, old habits have a way of sneaking back in. One of the most common pitfalls is mistaking detachment for indifference. Pulling back can feel uncomfortable, and you may worry that not reacting immediately means you don't care. For example, a friend might share frustration, and you stay calm and collected, only to question later whether you're being cold or uncaring. The reality is that staying grounded doesn't reduce your empathy. It preserves it. Being present with clarity is far more effective than reacting impulsively. Another trap is overcorrecting. Some people try detachment but swing too far in the opposite direction, shutting down entirely. You might avoid emotional conversations because they feel draining, even when your perspective would actually help the other person. Detachment isn't avoidance, it's conscious participation, learning to engage selectively, deciding when your presence is needed and when it's okay to step back, keeps empathy sustainable over the long term. A third pitfall is confusing boundaries with punishment. Setting limits is essential, but sometimes it can unintentionally feel like rejection. You might say no abruptly to repeated requests, and the other person interprets it as harshness. Boundaries are about protecting your energy, not judging others. Communicating clearly and kindly, framing your limits as a way to maintain healthy engagement, ensures that detachment strengthens relationships rather than damaging them. Ignoring your own signals is another common challenge. Your mind, body, and emotions all give cues when you're reaching capacity. But it's easy to push through anyway. You might stay late in a meeting or continue listening to repeated complaints because you feel obligated. Overriding your own signals leads to exhaustion and resentment. Regularly checking in with your energy and honoring it is critical. Finally, people often slip back into old patterns of people-pleasing. You might agree to emotional labor you don't have the capacity for, telling yourself it's kindness, only to feel resentment later. Reflection is key. Ask yourself whether you're helping because you genuinely choose to, or because you feel compelled. These pitfalls aren't failures. They're signals, feedback from your system. Recognizing them early lets you course-correct and maintain empathy as a conscious, sustainable strength. Here's the bottom line. Empathy is powerful, but only when it's paired with awareness. Left unchecked, it quietly drains your energy, clouds your judgment, and reshapes your life in ways you might not even notice. The difference between empathy as a strength and empathy as a weakness is simple. Detachment. Not indifference, not coldness, just clarity, boundaries, and conscious choice. Take a moment to reflect. How often do you give more than you can sustain? How many times do you absorb energy that isn't yours to carry? The more you notice these moments, the more you reclaim control. Every pause, every boundary, every conscious choice to engage or step back is a small victory. but add them together, and you've built a foundation where your empathy works for you, not against you. Remember, empathy is powerful, but only if you're in control of it. Take that step today.